my consciousness started to shift into my husband's body. He had suffered some severe brain damage. He was getting off the escalator and he was attacked and beaten by a homeless person. I had a husband. I was married in the 1998. My husband was my best friend, the most amazing man I had ever known at that point, and we had a wonderful relationship. One day I had a dream that I was in this dark city and I was sitting across from another man, not my husband, and it was so I couldn't understand what was happening. I had this deep, dark despair. It was like my heart was blackened and there was just this deep despair. Despair is the only word I can think of to describe it. And this despair was so intense. I was sitting across from this man thinking, what is this place? Where am I? What is going on? Why do I have this despair? And then it started to dawn on me that I had a husband before and his name. And I was thinking, wait a minute, wasn't I married? Wasn't I married to a man named Terry? And it was slowly starting to dawn on me. And then I woke up, and this is one of those dreams that stick with you, one that you don't forget. Now, I was just, a very typical American. I didn't have any spiritual beliefs. This is in the 90s and the early 2000s. And for me, I wasn't in the spiritual community. It's nothing like it was or that it is today. I was a Christian and we weren't going to church at the time, but my husband was an atheist. I wanted him to start going to church, and I had just talked him into starting to go to church with me, and we hadn't started going yet. So I was just, a very typical person. I was trying to keep up with the Joneses. We had 3 cars, we had nice things. I was about money, trying to make the most money. I was working 2 full-time jobs and just really trying to make something of ourselves monetarily. So we found out my dad had stomach cancer, and that was really difficult for me. Death was not something, my grandparents had died, but I wasn't super close to them, so it wasn't a big ordeal for me. Of course, I missed them and I was very sad, but it wasn't like my life had changed. I hadn't seen them in a few years. And so my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and I was faced with the possibility of my dad's death. And it still is very hard for me. So, excuse me. I'm sorry. So I was having a really hard time, and we were having like a little family reunion. We lived in Las Vegas at the time, and so it wasn't too difficult to have people come visit. And so we had some people coming out, my brother, my uncles, some family, and my husband and I were gonna spend the day with my brother down on the Strip, and my dad had gotten us a hotel room, and we were gonna hang out there and have a good time. So we spent the day on the Strip, but let me backtrack just a minute. That morning, I got really upset with my husband. I was overwhelmed with this feeling of my dad leaving. I don't know why I'm getting so emotional right now. I don't usually. But so I got into a big fight with my husband, and I told him that I hated him. I never told him that before. And so I didn't talk to him all day. We spent the day with my brother. I ignored my husband all day. He was very kind, and he gave me the space that I needed. He knew that I was upset about my dad, and he didn't judge me. He was a very good man. And so he let me have my space. And then evening came, my parents were watching my children, and they wanted to head back towards the house. And so we all went up to my hotel room, and I was going to stay with the kids, and my husband was going to stay too, but I felt guilty for ignoring him all day and not treating him well. So I gave him a big hug, and I told him that I was sorry and to go and have a good time with my brother. I'm sorry, buddy. I just need a second. I don't know why I'm so. So I gave my husband a big hug and I told him that I was sorry and I wanted him to have a go have a good time with my brother. And he was all about that. He was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go." I told him, "Don't worry about when you come back. Just go have a good time." And I'm really glad that I was able to apologize to him. And they say, always treat people as if it's the last time you're going to see them. If I had known, that was going to be the last day with my husband, I would not have acted that way. And so I think it's just worthy of pointing out that we overcome, our own battles and we treat people as well as possible at all times. Um, you always hear about things happening and you never think anything's going to happen to you or to your loved ones. And then they end up happening. So anyways, my husband went out and we had a few drinks that day. So I went down, took my boys down to the oxygen bar, and that was supposed to help with if you had been drinking. Not like we drank too much, but I just thought it would be kind of fun to do the oxygen bar. I had never done that before. So I went down there. The boys were kind of playing around. And my sister-in-law comes up behind me and she has a cell phone and she says, "You need to go find Rob right now. Terry's been hurt." Rob is my brother and Terry's my husband. And I thought that maybe he had hurt his hand or something. I didn't think there was going to be anything serious. So I was like, okay. And I got on the phone with my brother and he's like telling me where he's at. And I was like, well, what happened? Is he okay? And he couldn't really tell me anything. He said, "I don't know." And that's when I started to get concerned. What do you mean you don't know? Like, you're with him, you know he's okay. Just say he's okay. He hurt his pinky or stubbed his toe or something. And he just kept saying he didn't know. So in my sister-in-law was starting to get very frantic and pushing me to move faster, go faster, out the door. She had my boys with her. And so I'm starting to get really nervous and I start running and I go and I find my brother and he's across the street at the MGM Grand. And we're sitting outside and I don't know exactly what it was. It was a paved area, but there were no cars. There was an ambulance off in the distance and I was just sitting on the curb and no one's telling me. Well, my brother's the only one with me, but he's not telling me any details. And I felt like I sat there for an eternity. And then I saw the paramedics. They rolled my husband up on a stretcher or whatever they're called. And they're, about 100 yards away. And I yell out my husband's name, thinking that he'll give me some reassurance that he's okay. And I yell out, "Terry," and he didn't look. And he always used to reassure me. He was very good about that. If I ever looked at him, I was always, I have social anxiety and I don't enjoy large groups of people. So whenever we were at a party or something and I was looking for him, I could, look across the room and lock eyes with him and he would smile and give me a thumbs up, let me know everything was okay. And then he didn't do that. He didn't look over. He didn't give me a thumbs up. And so I ran over to him. And this was 20 years ago. I don't know why I'm so upset. But I ran over to him, and the paramedics put their hands up and they stopped me before I could get to him. And they said I couldn't come any closer, that I was too frantic, and that I couldn't ride in the ambulance. So they let my brother ride in the ambulance with them, and I took a cab. And we went to the University Medical Center there in Las Vegas. And he was in the trauma unit. And we sat there and sat there and sat there forever in the lobby. And we called all of our family. All of our family moved to Las Vegas to be by us. And my brother was in San Diego, so he wasn't very far. And so his parents moved there, my parents moved there, his brothers, my sister, everybody came up to the hospital to be with us. My uncle was there from out of town, of course, my brother was there. And I felt like we sat there and waited in the lobby forever and ever. Sometime in the middle of the night, they shuffled us all into this little room and said that he had suffered some severe brain damage. And I often forget to tell what happened to him because I just continue on with the story. But I found out later, and I still don't know all the details, that he was getting off the escalator and he was attacked and beaten by a homeless person in front of, just on the walkway between the MGM Grand and the Tropicana. And this was happened in 2003 in the middle of a crowd of people. And so they told us he had suffered brain damage. And to me, that was devastating. But I never thought that he would never wake up. So I was completely overwhelmed with grief for him for having brain damage. But I was positive that I was okay, that I would be able to handle it, that I would take care of him, feed him, and bathe him, whatever he needed. And nobody supported that. They said that he wouldn't be happy like that. And that wasn't a good decision. I wouldn't be able to do that. But I was adamant that I would. I knew that he was going to wake back up and he was going to at least still be my husband and be alive, be here. Well, I stayed in the hospital with him for a few days, and I was really getting tired. I was sleeping in this chair. There was only a chair in the room, and I was reading to him from magazines and staying up late. And the few times that I did try to sleep, it was nearly impossible. It was a university hospital, so there was a lot of action going on, a lot of people in and out of the room, doctors, nurses, and students. And one wall was almost just all windows. It was very bright. There was no turning off the lights, no closing the curtains and having privacy and darkness. So it was very difficult to sleep or get any rest there. So I decided to go take a rest at my brother-in-law's house, my husband's brother. And I at his house, I started to feel dizzy a couple times. Once was in the bathroom as I was getting ready, another time when I was walking down the hall. And then another time when I was sitting on the couch and the TV was on and some of Terry's friends were around. We had come from the Atlanta area and moved to Las Vegas. He had so many friends. He was a great guy and so many people loved him so much. And so the minute everyone found out about what happened to him, everyone flew out. There was probably 50 people between the hospital and his brother's house where people were at all times, family, friends. So there was a few friends there at his brother's house, and I was sitting on the couch and this dizziness started to overcome me again. And I thought it was going to go away like the other times, just kind of shake it off. But this time it didn't go away and it intensified. And I had to lay back on the couch and the TV was on. I could hear the TV, but it started to sound like it was echoing, kind of like not echoey, but if you have ever, the best way I describe it is if you've ever talked to as a child through a plastic pipe, like a PVC pipe, what that sounds like is what the TV started to sound like. Kind of like far away and plasticky and a little echoey. And I was looking at the TV. I remember looking at the screen and I could see this. There was like a circle of vision around, I think it was like some kind of talk show, and the host was, I could see a circle around their face that was clear vision, and everything around that kind of like stretched back. Like if you've ever seen Star Trek or Star Wars, and the ship takes off and the lights stretch back as they go into warp speed. It was like that. Everything stretched back around this circle of clear vision. I didn't feel any motion or anything like that. Um, but I started to feel extreme panic, and I've never felt panic like this before in my life. And I realized my consciousness started to shift into my husband's body. Except when it shifted into my husband's body, it was me. Um, I it wasn't like my body, but my consciousness. I became my husband. I don't know how to describe it any better than that. I became him, and it was me laying there. And but I was also me laying on the couch. And so the my consciousness sort of kind of flickered back and forth like a candlelight, but intensely fast, like infinitely fast, flickering. So it was like I was in both places at the same time. And I could feel the panic. And I thought that, oh my gosh, I hallucinated that it happened to him. It really happened to me. I'm the one laying in the hospital bed. I'm dying. I'm the one dying, not him. And I could feel everyone's thoughts and emotions in the hospital for me. All his friends and family that had arrived, that were waiting in the lobby. I could feel their thoughts and emotions, their pity for me, thinking, poor her. She's so young. She has a family. This isn't fair. I could feel all of it. And then it stopped. And this was, I think, the third day that he was in the hospital. So the next day that I went to the hospital, there had been some changes in his condition. He had started to decline severely. His body started falling apart. His lungs had collapsed, and his body was filling up with air. And his face and his eyes were swollen with air. And it really just felt different when I walked into the room. And like I said, I had no spiritual upbringing. I had no spiritual ideas, or I didn't think philosophically or outside the box. I was just a very typical inside the box 9 to 5 American worker. So for me to feel that the energy was different in the room really hit me hard. I didn't know what that meant. It was very strange. And I didn't know what had happened to me earlier either. Like when I was on the couch and was having that panic and anxiety, I thought I had an anxiety attack. Somebody told me that it was a panic attack. So that's what I thought it was. And for 20 years, that's what I thought it was until I started to tell people about it. And then they told me no. And I looked at other experiences and found that it was a shared death experience, even though I didn't go all the way to the other side with him. I feel like he came to me at his very moment of death. He came to me, or I came to him, or somehow we came together. I don't know. Our love was strong enough to connect us to that event. Oh. So I had a couple days later, his body continued to deteriorate, and a couple days later, they told me that I had to make a decision. If I was going to keep him on life support, they were going to have to do some pretty invasive and horrific surgeries. And nobody thought that was a very good idea. So reluctantly, I had to sign the paperwork to take him off of life support. And I can still remember the paper and the pen and how it felt to sign my name there. I couldn't stay in the hospital as they unplugged him, but his parents did. His parents stayed with him. So I rode home, and then I couldn't go home for a little while. I stayed at my brother-in-law's house for, I don't know, a couple weeks, couple days. I don't remember exactly. But then when I went home, I started having these strange experiences. First, and this is one of the things that I've never talked about before, but when I was pregnant with my son, who was then at that time 3 years old, we were walking through the mall. I worked at the mall, and we were walking through Dillard's. And I saw this clock that I really liked. And I said, "That's such a beautiful clock." And he surprised me with it. Um, I went back to work after my lunch break, and then he came later and he brought me the clock in a beautiful wrapped box. So this box was on my mantle, and it had stopped at the time of his death. And so I thought that was very interesting. And then one time I couldn't find the wipes because my son was going through potty training, and I didn't have to go to the store. So I stood in the hallway, and with every emotion that I had ever had, everything that I was, I asked, I begged, "Please show me where the wipes are." I looked all over the house, and I walked. It was like something took over my body, and I walked right over to where the wipes were. I said, "Please, Terry, show me where the wipes are." And I picked up a blanket, and the wipes were right there. And so these kind of events started happening on a regular basis. And then I started having out of body experiences as well. The first time I had one, I hadn't been home very long, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and the room was vibrating. And I was vibrating. I was the same vibration as the room. I and the room were vibrating together as one thing. There was no separation, even though I could see the room in front of me. The vibrations connected us. I don't know how to explain it, but it was the room filled with this beautiful golden light. It was so amazing and peaceful, and I felt my husband's presence. And this golden light was even brighter outside the room. It was just this very soft light inside the room, but the door to the hall was closed, and the closet door was closed as well. And around the closet door and the hall door, I could see that there was an even brighter gold light on the other side that was coming through the cracks. And it was just shining like beams of bright golden light into the room. And inside this golden light, there was glitter floating all around, kind of like the glitter, like in my background, that dense, like in this area, very dense, lots of it. And it was floating and sparkling, and it was just so beautiful. Like if you see a beam of light coming through the sun or the window, it was an experience I'll never forget. And I thought my husband had come to visit me, and that's what this was, that he was coming from the other side to show me that he still existed, because I was Christian and he was an atheist. Christianity didn't really answer all of my problems at that time. It was okay before this big event happened to me, but I needed now to know. I didn't want to believe anymore. And then Christianity also told me that if it was true that my husband was in hell and he was going to suffer and burn for eternity, and that wasn't acceptable to me. So I needed to know that he was going to be okay, that he was okay, that he still existed, and that I would see him again someday. And I felt like he gave me this experience to know that. Me, being a very hard-headed and skeptical person, didn't really understand, and it took me so many years for all these experiences to really sink in and let me believe that we are eternal spiritual beings. We are timeless beings that never really truly die, and we will be with our loved ones again. That's the most beautiful the most beautiful thing that I know right now is that, but it took me many, many years, even after intense spiritual experiences, to let it all sink in. Because, like I said, I have very skeptical, very scientific brain. And I wasn't raised to believe in those things. I was raised to believe those things were wrong. And we weren't to dabble in those things, and that people that did that kind of stuff weren't genuine, or were able to communicate with the other side. So I didn't know what this experience was. I never heard of an out of body experience, so I consulted with my parents' church. I wasn't going to a church at that time. Really, I consulted with my parents, and they kind of had this little intervention for me to tell me that it was very dangerous for me to be doing those things, and that I need to stop immediately or I could go crazy. And I that wasn't a good explanation for me, because that's not what fit my experience. So I found a spiritual church, and they told me that, lo and behold, I was having an out of body experience. And then I thought they were crazy, because that doesn't exist. I never heard of that. And you can't exist without your body. You can't, leave your body and float around. Oh, and I forgot to mention that I was not in my body during that experience. I was laying on the bed is like this, and then I was laying on the side. This is my back, and my back was to the side of the bed. So they told me it was an out of body experience. I thought they were crazy. I went home and I looked it up, and I found some Yahoo groups. This was back in 2003. I just got a computer. I didn't really know how to utilize it that well. Definitely not like we do nowadays. But I did do some searches on out of body experiences, and it's opened up a whole new world for me. And I started studying all these amazing things, and I started learning how amazing we are, and that I was not taught everything that I should have been taught. We're not taught the things that we need to be taught, the things that we need to know, who we truly are as we were growing up. At least I wasn't when I was a child. So I came to near death experiences as well. I read a book. I came across a book by Dr. Moody called Life After Life. And it just changed my mind about everything. It cracked me open, I guess, is kind of a way to explain it. I was so intrigued by this idea that people were coming close to death and then coming back and telling these amazing stories. And so I got to the end of the book, and I saw Dr. Moody's contact info, and I emailed him, never expecting to hear back from him, but I did. He emailed me back, and he invited me to spend the day with him in his home in Alabama. He lived on a river in a beautiful old mill, and it was 3 stories. And on the third story, he had this gorgeous layout. There's so much art, and it was so much fun, and crystals. And he had this psychomantium there, and he allowed me to sit in his psychomantium. I didn't have an experience that day, but I did later. I made a makeshift psychomantium in my house, but later I had an experience. But that Dr. Moody, I owe him so much, because he did the work that he does has changed the world since the 70s. We're really on a beautiful spiritual path and learning about near-death experiences because of him. And I don't I'm not affiliated with Dr. Moody, but he's one of the nicest and kindest and most giving men that I've ever met in my life. Most patient. I think I just sat there and cried the whole day that I was there, and he was patient with me and kind and caring and loving. But anyways, I continued to have amazing experiences on a regular basis, out of body experiences, visitations, all kinds of things. And it led me to believe, to know the point of this was that I didn't want to believe anymore. I wanted to know. And it really gave me that knowing that we're not the the finite beings, these mortal bodies. We are not that. These bodies are like our clothes. I could take off my jacket right now and it would be the same, a little bit deeper than that, but similar. That we exist well beyond the death of this body, and that we're going to be with our loved ones again They've never left us. In fact, I feel like they're still, my dad has since passed. He passed 4 years after my husband. And I had a lot of experiences from my dad too. And they're still with us. And I cry, yes, because I miss their physical presence. I want to hug them. But sometimes I even get to do that during their visitations and in my dreams. But more than that, I sense them and I can talk to them. And there's even more than just our loved ones. There's something beyond that too. There's this whole consciousness that loves us and cares for us and that's watching out for us, that's with us, protecting us and loving us all the time, every second of our life. And that consciousness also communicates with us as well. And I'm learning how to do that. I'm learning how to listen to that. And it's just, since I started my podcast, this consciousness told me to start this podcast. And I didn't know how to do a podcast. I didn't know how to talk to people about experiences, their spiritual. I didn't know how to contact people. And this voice asked me to just please trust it. And I did. And then my podcast has grown exponentially. I've been doing it, I think, just 7 months, and I have over 17,000 subscribers. And it's been a huge gift. And I do feel like I'm being divinely guided to share that maybe my experiences were so that I could come to this point in my life to help others realize the same thing, that we're not going to just die. I don't want people to fear death. I was so terrified of death. I was so terrified of this grief. I was in such deep grief for decades. And I don't want people to have to experience that. It took me so long to overcome some of the things, and I'm still working on that. But since starting my podcast, my spiritual journey has been accelerated to warp speed. I have met amazing people like you, Betty, and so many others. I'm a group leader for IANDS as well. And this has just been an amazing experience for me to be able to actually talk to people and share in their experiences, hear about them, ask my questions, and share that with my audience. And I'm just very blessed to be in the place that I am now. And I realize now that my husband's death was a huge tragedy, but maybe the reason I chose to experience that, not that his death was for me or had anything to do with me, but maybe I chose to share in his death, to love someone, to love him during that experience that he had, so that I could do what I'm doing now. But there's so much more to tell and not enough time. And but I hope
I'm
that
like,
kind of gets the gist of it.
I'm blown away. That was so amazing. Honestly, I think we're just going to leave it there. I'm so grateful for your willingness to come and serve our community. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and your authenticity and letting us see those emotions, because the grief process is not linear. Like 10 years, 20 years can go by, and just talking about it can bring something up. And I think that that's the beauty of the human experience, is allowing those emotions to come, and they pass and we survive them and we have each other. And I think that's really beautiful. I just want to thank you so much again for your willingness to serve our community, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, thank you so much for your willingness also, Betty. You're amazing. Thank you so much for all you do.